Hello and welcome to another episode of the Good Hearted Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Anderson, and today I'm talking about the books that I read in August and September of this year. So I do not have the physical copy of any of these books that I'm going to talk about, but they will be linked in the description. I was actually able to get all of these books from my library for free. And with my library, I can either rent a physical copy or one that is an audiobook or an electronic one that I can read on my Kindle, which is huge. It's been so nice for me to not have that guilt of buying a book and then not enjoying it and feeling like I've wasted money and time versus when I get a book from the library, I've just wasted my time. And towards the end of this episode, I can talk more about how I rent my books. But for now, I just want to get into the books that I read in the last few months that I rated as 5 stars. And this doesn't mean that they are like perfect and you will absolutely love them, but they were my favorites of the last couple months. So the very first one is In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This book is a fucking mess. But I loved it so much. I really fell in love with Ashley's writing in this book and just how she told the story. And she just kept me hooked. And I was so fascinated the whole time, even though there were some really messed up things happening in the book. And I didn't even really like any of the characters. Like they were all kind of bad people that had done bad things. And normally, if I can't like connect with one of the characters or I don't fall in love with a certain character or relationship or the place where the story is happening, like I can't get through the book. But I thought about this all the time. Whenever I wasn't listening to the audiobook, I was thinking about it and I was trying to figure it out and I was just itching to know what happened. And that's what I love about audiobooks is sometimes if the narrator is really good, it can just really set the scene for you and you can do chores or things that you need to do and still be able to listen to an audiobook and kind of be totally immersed in this other world and these other people's problems. And so I just thought that it was really interesting. Even though there were some things that I could maybe predict, I still enjoyed the ending. Like I really loved everything about this book. And I think it is a good one to read if you are interested in kind of a murder mystery thriller kind of book. The next book that I gave 5 stars to in August was A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. I think anyway. The first name is spelled Alix. But this was a short story. I again listened to the audiobook and it was only 4 hours long. And it was just a really interesting story. It was kind of a retelling of Sleeping Beauty and also like the multiverse, I think is what you call it, where a girl from modern day who has an illness and is not supposed to live very long is able to go into this other universe where she meets like an actual damsel in distress, just like Sleeping Beauty, who is bound to prick her finger. And, they both have this endooming death and they are able to kind of work together and figure some things out and understand other people's decisions in the story and things like that. And I love those classic stories that I love so much, but it being kind of tied into something that seems totally whack and like they should not go together. And this is what that book gave me. So in August, I was definitely on like a thriller kick and kind of mystery and fantasy things. And so those were the only 2 books in August that I gave a 5 star to. And then in September, I was kind of back into wanting something that was feel good and lovey-dovey, honestly, because I started reading Just Like Home. And then about 3/4 into it, I just stopped because it scared the shit out of me. And I still have borrowed it from my library. And so I just have to like get up the courage to finish it because it has also been a very good, captivating book, but it's scary as shit and it's scaring me. It's spooking me a little bit. So anyway, I decided to like totally switch gears into something lighthearted and something that would maybe be funny and just more of a love story. And so this next book that I gave 5 stars to, I really didn't think I was even going to like it at all, mainly because of the cover and the title. So it's called The Bromance Book Club. Like already I'm like, gag me. That sounds so like cliche and cheesy, but I'm telling you, it was like the funniest book that I've read in a very long time. Oh, and it's by Lisa K. Adams, is I believe how you pronounce their name. But I just loved how funny it was. And it was told from like a third person point of view, but focused on the 2 people in this main relationship, the husband and the wife. And the whole story was about about mending their marriage and trying to come back together and really get down to what made them tick and why they were good together and why they loved each other and meant to be together. And so I just love that it was like a second chance romance kind of thing with people who were already married, because I've been married since I was 21. And so a lot of these books are about, new relationships and people breaking up and coming back together. But I've been trying to find more stories that talk about marriage and married couples, and especially like couples with kids, because that is the life that I am living right now. And it's just so much more relatable to me and can also encourage me and help me think of other ways to kind of do things differently in my relationship. And so I really enjoyed that one. Then the last book I just finished yesterday, which was October 2nd. So I don't know if this should count as a September read, but I started it at the end of September. And so I'm counting it anyway because it is like my new favorite book. I gave it 5 stars and it's called Fool Me Once, again by Ashley Winstead. So after I read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, I went ahead and put like all of her other books on hold. Because I was like, I just have a feeling I am really going to like these books because I fell in love with how she wrote. And so this was her first like romance book that I had read, or women's fiction, or however it's classified. So it's about this couple who has history and then they end up having to work together on a project. So it's like, again, second chance romance. They dated when they were very young and they both made big mistakes. And then they are both able to kind of get some closure, and they both grow so much in this book. I loved the relationship. Whenever they were kind of reminiscing about their old relationship, it reminded me of a previous relationship that I had been in. The main character really reminded me of my sister, and in the book there was a sister relationship, which also there was in the bromance book club as well. And I'm just finding I love that because I have 3 sisters and 1 brother, and so I just love when a book has more like main characters than just the love interest. And you're able to kind of see the main character's support system through their family or siblings, and kind of how, just that relationship is. Sometimes it's really funny, sometimes it's just heartfelt. And I just am really loving that aspect of books. And so, yeah, this one also had me laughing my ass off like multiple times. I would just be like, did they really just say that? And it was so good. It was a pleasant surprise. And I loved the ending. I loved everything about this book. And so those are the 4 like top books that I have read in the last 2 months. And so basically for a book to be 5 stars for me, I have to be very excited to read it. It has to be a fast enough pace that it keeps me interested, because again, I'm a Gemini. I get distracted very easily. And if a story is boring, I will just not pick it back up again. And so it has to be intriguing for me. It has to have some kind of mystery where I can't figure out exactly where it's going all the time. So I don't want it to be super predictable. I love when it's funny, even if it's a serious book, but there's like a couple funny moments in it. I really appreciate that. And then also just a feel good feeling at the end where I feel like the author has done right by me. And so, some of these books, you might hate them, but for me, they were 5 stars for me. And then I did have a few honorable mentions that I rated as 4 stars instead of 5 that just didn't quite hit the mark for me. And the first one was Mommy Burnout by Cheryl G. Ziegler. And so this book, I listened to the audiobook. I liked it for the most part. There were some things that I had issues with and just some things that I thought were repetitive or drawn out. But the reason why I ended up giving this a 4 star instead of a 3 star was because of like the very last chapter when she was talking about depression versus stress, and basically setting up some examples and giving tips on being able to kind of check yourself and see if you are actually depressed right now or if you're just stressed out, and then kind of how to move forward and how to change some things for yourself. And so that last chapter for me was like very helpful, very convicting, very eye-opening. And so that was why I ended up getting getting 4 stars instead of 3, but some of the book was just very boring or like really focused on like normal. And for those of you who aren't watching on YouTube, I'm doing air quotes, like a nuclear family with one mom and one dad and 2 kids or something like that. I felt like there could have been way more diversity in the language in the book and helping with different kinds of situations. But overall, I thought it was kind of helpful for me as a mom to hear some of my thoughts being written by a doctor and somebody who had talked to lots of other moms and were feeling kind of the same feelings I was. And again, just to kind of check in on myself and how motherhood is going for me right now. And then the other honorable mention I have that I also gave 4 stars to was The Last Housewife, also by Ashley Winstead. Are you surprised that I read 3 books by the same author in 2 months? You shouldn't be, because I am like obsessed with these books. And again, this book was like a crazy roller coaster. I don't even really want to say anything because I'm afraid I will give stuff away, but it was wild. It was intense. It was different than something I had ever read before, but it was so intriguing. It gripped me. I had to know what was happening. But then the ending just seemed a little too far-fetched for me. And honestly, that's why I knocked it down to 4 stars instead of 5. I was like loving it up until the last part. And the ending was still good. It was great. But again, it just didn't hit like all of my things that make me like think that it's a 5-star book. And usually if it's 5 stars, it's probably something I would read again. Doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. If I gave it 4 stars, it's just like, I just got to pick my favorite. And just for shits and gigs, I wanted to talk about my least favorite book that I read in the last couple months. And that is A Court of Thorns and Roses. I really feel led astray by the book talk community and all of the book groups I'm in on Facebook and everything else, because this book has been so hyped. I was bracing for some like amazing magical fantasy with some really hot scenes that I was gonna like need to cleanse myself of after, just because of the way everybody was talking about this book and that it was like filthy and all of these things. But it really fell short for me. It was a really slow burn. I felt like some things just dragged on, and then some things like about the world and the magic just weren't really explained super well, in my opinion. And so it didn't even like build the world as well as people say. Like they're like, well, the first one's not as good because it's like setting up the whole series. But like I just didn't really feel that there was that much thought that went into the setup. And also, I should have counted how many times, but there was probably almost 100 times that the author wrote, she clicked her tongue, he clicked his tongue, like always about tongue clicking. When the author's saying that, I'm thinking like, which maybe that's what it was. But then finally, after I was done reading the book, because I didn't want to spoil it, I looked up like that phrase with the book, and other people's theories are they're going like tisking or something. Either way, why the fuck do all the characters click their tongues the whole time in that book? That just was a huge turnoff for me. I hate when authors use the same phrase over and over and over and over and over again, especially when they use a phrase and then like a couple pages later they use that phrase again. That just like really irritates me, and I felt like this author did that a lot in this book. And so maybe I'm the only crazy one, but I don't even have a desire to read the rest of my books. One of my friends did tell me on Goodreads that like the next book really is better and like I should read it, but I'm just like, why? I ended up listening to this audiobook on like 2x speed just to get fucking through it. And so I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I did not like that book at all. But again, maybe that's just a me problem. So between August and September, I read a total of 12 books. Sometimes I read way more than that. Sometimes it's way less. But if you would like to see all the books that I have read, you can find me on Goodreads. I will leave the link in the description for that account. And then that way you can see all the things that I've read and the star rating that I gave them, and if I added any other little comments for my review. And I would love to be friends with you on there, because I'm always looking for something new to read or to put on my TBR list. And especially now that I've like distanced myself from social media and Facebook, I usually check Goodreads first thing in the morning. So since it is spooky season, I think I'm going to try to get my hands on a couple more witchy books to read in October and probably even into November, because I honestly feel like Halloween does not get the amount of celebration it deserves when it comes to like Christmas. And I love Christmas, but I just want to ride out my spooky theme for a little bit longer. And so I've got a couple that I'm waiting for from the library. And then I don't know, we'll have to see what I like in the next couple months. And then I am also excited to get into Christmas books. I love just like doing nothing in December, but sitting and reading under a warm blanket, drinking my coffee whenever I have some alone time. And then, maybe listening to an audiobook while I do some gift wrapping to just kind of help me get in this. We'll see if I finish just like Home. Please send good vibes because I don't know. I'm afraid I'm going to get nightmares if I finish it. Oh, and before I totally end, I think I've talked about this before, but I do borrow most of the books that I read from my library. And thankfully, my library is connected to the Libby app, Libby. I will link it in the description as well. But through that Libby app, I can rent audiobooks and Kindle ebooks, or literally just read them from the Kindle app in my phone or the Libby app. And so I just love having options because sometimes I don't want to carry around a physical book. Sometimes it's way easier for me to just hop on my phone and read from my phone for a few minutes, and mine syncs like with my Kindle. And so, if I'm able to take my Kindle or I pick it up, then I can read it there. And then I also just love having an audiobook there and ready for me when I'm in the mood to start one or have a few minutes to listen to one. And so Libby has allowed me to read almost 40 books this year without having to pay for any of them. I still love physical books. I try really hard not to buy ones that I like, but I love getting them as gifts. Or, if I see one that's on a really good sale and it was one of those ones I gave a 5-star rating to, I might grab it just to add it to my library as like a comfort thing, to just know that I have a book that will make me feel good and make me happy there when I need it, even if I only read a little bit of it at a time, or if I sit there and read the whole thing in a day. It's kind of like a little security blanket thing for me to be surrounded by books that make me happy. And I also like renting different genre books because sometimes like thrillers or mysteries or just very serious books get way too sad or scary or down for me, and I need like a pick me up. So then that's when I will switch to a book that's way lighter or funnier or, all about love and happiness and hearts, because I need to kind of like flip flop between the two. Because if I'm already having a bad mental day, I do not need to listen to a book that will like contribute to those negative feelings. I need a book that will help like bring me out of it or distract me from my negative feelings. So thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like and subscribe. I'm really excited to keep talking about the books that I'm reading, and feel free to leave a comment with the book that you're reading right now, and maybe I'll add it to my list too. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in my next video.